All right, let's jump right in. Today we're looking at Acts chapter 14.
Okay, sounds good.
We've got our new King James Version Bibles ready to go.
Awesome.
So this chapter follows Paul and Barnabas on one of their missionary journeys, and it's packed with miracles and cultural clashes and even a near-death experience.
Yeah, this is one of the more action-packed chapters for sure.
So get ready, folks. This is going to be a wild ride.
I think one of the things that makes this chapter so fascinating is how it shows us how difficult it was to introduce a new faith-like Christianity into a world that was already so steeped in different religious and cultural beliefs.
You know, that's a great point, and it also shows how incredibly brave those early Christians were. I mean, they were going up against some pretty entrenched ideas.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the story starts in Iconium, and Paul and Barnabas, being Paul and Barnabas, they head straight for the synagogue.
Of course, that's their MO.
Right. And their message is so powerful that huge crowds are converting both Jews and Greeks.
It's interesting, isn't it, that this blending of cultures around this new faith is something we see over and over again throughout the book of Acts.
It is, yeah. It suggests that the message of early Christianity had this really broad appeal.
Yeah, it resonated with a very diverse group of people.
But this also led to some tension, especially with those who wanted to hold on to those traditional Jewish practices.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And the text even says that unbelieving Jews stirred up the Gentiles and poisoned their minds against the brethren.
Wow, that's strong language.
Yeah, it is. It really underscores the depth of the conflict.
So what was it really about? I mean, what was at the heart of this conflict?
Well, from the perspective of the people who were opposing the message, these early Christians were seen as a threat.
Okay, I can see that.
They were breaking away from established Jewish practices, and they were proclaiming Jesus as the Messiah.
Right.
And that challenged the whole religious authority structure of the time.
Which is never going to go down easy.
Nope. So even with all of this pushback, Paul and Barnabas stay in Iconium for a significant period of time.
They did, yeah.
And the text says they were speaking boldly in the Lord and even performing miracles.
That's right, yeah.
There's one phrase that really struck me. Bearing witness to the word of his grace.
Oh, yeah.
It seems like they weren't just preaching, they were embodying that power of God in their lives.
Absolutely. Their actions were completely intertwined with their words.
It was more than just talk.
Yeah, and these miracles, they weren't just spectacles or entertainment.
No.
They were signs pointing to the truth they were proclaiming.
Right.
And to God's active presence in their lives.
And then things get really intense.
Oh.
There's this plot to attack Paul and Barnabas, and they have to escape to Lystra and Derbe.
Yeah, they had to get out of there.
This wasn't an isolated incident for them, was it?
Sadly, no danger seemed to follow them pretty much everywhere they went.
That's right.
I mean, this is just one example of the constant persecution that early Christians faced.
Yeah, for real.
Paul and Barnabas' journey really shows us the risks they took to spread their message.
Right.
And it really speaks to the strength of their faith and their commitment to their mission.
Okay, so now they're in Lystra.
Okay.
And this is where things take a really interesting turn.
Okay, all right.
Paul comes across a man who's been crippled from birth.
Right.
And seeing this man's faith tells him to stand up.
This scene just perfectly sums up who Paul is. I mean, he observes the man so intently, and he sees this deep faith within him.
It's like he could see the potential for healing before it even happened.
Exactly.
And of course, the man is instantly healed.
It's amazing.
He jumps up and starts walking. We know that these types of healing miracles were a big part of Jesus's ministry.
Yeah, they were.
But how did the people who actually witnessed them interpret those miracles?
That's a great question.
Were they seen as just displays of power, or was there a deeper meaning there?
For many people, these miracles were just undeniable proof that God was intervening in their lives.
Right.
It went beyond just curing physical ailments.
Yeah.
It hinted at this deeper spiritual reality.
Oh, God.
The power of God to actually transform lives
I see.
in really profound ways.
But in this case, the crowd's reaction is, well, let's just say they totally misread the situation.
Oh no, what happened?
They immediately assume that Paul and Barnabas are gods who've come down to earth.
Oh wow.
And they even try to give them names from their own pantheon.
That's why.
They call Barnabas Zeus, the king of the gods, and Paul, Hermes, the messenger.
Talk about a cultural clash.
Right. What do you think made them jump to that conclusion?
Well, I think it's a really good example of how these different worldviews were colliding in the Roman Empire.
Okay.
The people of Lystra were so deeply rooted in their polytheistic beliefs,
Right.
where they believed that all these different deities with their own specific powers influenced every aspect of their lives.
Sure.
So when they witnessed this incredible healing, they tried to interpret it through the lens of what they already knew.
So they were trying to make sense of something totally extraordinary by fitting it into their existing understanding of how the world worked.
Exactly, yeah.
And of course, Paul and Barnabas are not happy about being suddenly elevated to godlike status.
Not at all. They were horrified.
Yeah.
I mean, being worshipped as gods went completely against everything they believed in.
Absolutely.
Their reaction, tearing their clothes and running into the crowd, shows how much they hated this idea of idolatry.
Yeah, and it really highlights their unwavering belief in just one God.
Their monotheism takes center stage here.
And that's a pretty stark contrast to those polytheistic beliefs that surrounded them, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. It just underscores their commitment to the one true God.
And Paul, he doesn't miss a beat. He uses this opportunity to preach about the living God, the creator of all things.
He does. He doesn't waste any time.
The one who reveals himself not through these mythological stories, but through creation itself and acts of goodness.
That idea of God revealing himself through creation is so fascinating, isn't it?
It is. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, so theologians call this general revelation. It's this idea that God makes himself known through the natural world and the inherent goodness we see in humanity.
Okay.
It's like a way to understand God that's accessible to everyone.
So even without scriptures or any kind of direct revelation, people can still see God's presence in the world around them.
That's the idea.
Paul's arguing that the very existence of the universe, all of the order and the beauty we see in it, points to a creator.
Exactly.
And he goes on to explain that God has been working throughout history,
Right.
showing his goodness through things like rain and bountiful harvests and the food that we eat.
It's really smart. He's appealing to their shared experience, to what they already know about the world, to help them understand this concept of one true God.
That's a pretty compelling argument, especially when you consider that they were moments away from offering sacrifices to Paul and Barnabas.
Yeah, for sure. It was a bold move.
It was.
And for a little while, it seems like it worked.
Right.
The text actually says that they were scarcely able to restrain the multitudes from sacrificing to them.
But unfortunately, that moment doesn't last, does it?
No, things take another dramatic turn.
There we go again.
Right.
Tell me what happens.
Well, some Jews from Antioch and Iconium show up,
Oh, no.
and they stir up the crowd and convince them to turn against Paul.
And so suddenly, Paul finds himself being stoned and left for dead outside the city.
It's a stark reminder of how quickly things could change in those times.
Right.
How quickly public opinion could shift.
Yeah, it was a very volatile environment.
It was. And it highlights the very real danger that early Christians faced all the time.
It's amazing that he survived that ordeal.
It is.
He gets up and continues his journey. I mean, talk about resilience.
I know, right? This becomes a really key moment in Paul's story. It showcases his unwavering dedication to his mission, even when he's staring death in the face.
So, do they finally pack it in and head home after that?
You'd think so, right? But no, not at all.
Okay.
They travel to Derbe, they preach the gospel, they make more disciples, and get this, they actually choose to go back to the cities where they had just faced such intense opposition.
Lystra, Iconium, and Antioch.
Wait, seriously? Why would they put themselves back in danger like that?
That's a great question, and it really speaks to their strategy. They understood that planting the seeds of faith was just the first step.
Right.
They needed to nurture those fledgling communities,
Okay, I see.
strengthen their resolve, and equip them for the inevitable challenges that were to come.
So it wasn't just about conversion, it was about really building a foundation.
Exactly. They were building for the long haul.
And they didn't sugarcoat things for those new converts either.
No, they didn't.
They told them straight up that following Christ would involve some hardship.
That's right. They were upfront about the difficulties.
Why do you think they chose to focus on the tough parts of following Jesus?
Well, I think they knew from firsthand experience that choosing to follow Jesus wasn't always going to be easy.
It wasn't always going to be comfortable.
Right.
And they wanted to prepare these new Christians for the reality of what they might face.
They wanted to make sure they were ready for the persecution that might come their way.
Exactly, to instill in them a resilience
Resilience, yeah.
that would allow them to hold on to their faith even when times got tough.
It makes you wonder, wouldn't it have been easier just to focus on the positive stuff?
Maybe, but I think they understood that sometimes faith grows strongest when it's tested.
Okay.
It's through facing challenges and overcoming obstacles. that we really figure out what we believe.
It's like a muscle that gets stronger the more you work it.
That's a great analogy.
And this idea of suffering for what you believe in, that's not something new, is it?
No, not at all. This theme of suffering for the sake of the gospel pops up throughout the entire New Testament.
Yeah, you're right. It really challenges that idea that faith is all about feeling good and being comfortable.
It does. It really does. It's a call to something deeper.
Something that takes real courage and resilience. A willingness to face the hard parts of the journey.
Exactly.
And the story of Paul and Barnabas gives us a powerful example of how to handle those tough parts.
Yeah, it does. They faced so much opposition, endured so much hardship, and were even rejected by their own people.
And yet, they never gave up on their mission.
They never did. Their perseverance is truly inspiring.
It really is. It reminds us that we're not alone in those struggles.
We're not.
Other people have walked this path before us.
They have.
And they've come out stronger on the other side.
And that brings us back to what you were saying earlier about community.
Yeah.
Paul and Barnabas didn't face these challenges by themselves.
No, they didn't.
They had each other, and they had the support of all these new Christian communities that were springing up.
Right.
They understood the power of coming together.
Right, of supporting each other and encouraging each other.
Exactly.
That sense of community is so important.
It really is. Especially when you're facing challenges or feeling discouraged.
Absolutely.
That's when we need to lean on each other.
Draw strength from each other.
Exactly.
And remind each other of what we believe in.
And that's one of the reasons why appointing those elders was such a crucial step in the development of the early church.
I see.
These elders weren't just figureheads.
Right.
They were spiritual guides, mentors, shepherds.
Right, taking care of those new communities.
Exactly.
So as we think about this part of the story, I think it's really important to remember that faith isn't something we're supposed to do alone.
That's a great point.
It's about finding our people, our community,
our tribe.
the people who get it,
Absolutely.
the people who can support us and challenge us and help us stay strong when things get tough.
And it's about remembering that we have a responsibility to be that support system for others as well.
Right.
Just like Paul and Barnabas nurtured those communities they established, we're called to encourage and uplift and strengthen those around us.
I love that. It's a beautiful reminder that faith is both a personal journey and something we do together.
Absolutely. We're all in this together.
Supporting each other, learning from each other, and working together to make the world a better place.
That's beautiful. It reminds me of this quote from Hebrews. It says, "And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching."
That's a powerful reminder of how important community is, especially when we're facing tough times.
It is.
We need each other.
We do.
We need to come together and share our stories and offer support.
And remind each other of the hope that keeps us going.
And that hope is ultimately rooted in knowing that we're not alone.
That's right.
We have God who loves us.
He does.
And who's with us every step of the way.
Every step.
The story of Paul and Barnabas is proof of that.
It is. They faced incredible adversity, but they never lost sight of their mission.
Or their faith in God.
Exactly. And their efforts changed the world, They helped spread Christianity and transform countless lives.
And their story still resonates today.
It does. It really does. It reminds us that we can make a difference, too.
Even in small ways.
Even in small ways, yeah. We can be beacons of hope.
We can be agents of change.
Working together to build a more just and compassionate world.
And we can do it all knowing that we have the strength of God to help us along the way.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it reminds us that we don't have to be perfect to be used by God.
I love that their journey really shows us that faith isn't a solo thing. It's about building community and supporting each other and working together.
Absolutely.
Speaking of community, let's talk about this whole thing with appointing elders. It seems like a small detail, but it tells us a lot about how the early church was developing, right?
Right, it does. The appointment of elders in each of these new churches shows that they were starting to create some structure for leadership in the early Christian movement. It wasn't just about charismatic figures like Paul and Barnabas.
Okay.
They knew that these new communities needed guidance and support.
So they weren't just focused on converting people, they were thinking about the long-term health of these churches.
Exactly.
That's pretty impressive considering how new this whole thing was at the time.
It really is, yeah.
They were setting things up for a faith that would last for centuries.
They had a vision for the future.
And they were pretty realistic about the challenges ahead, too.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't try to make things sound easy for these new converts.
You didn't sugarcoat anything.
No, they flat out told them that being a Christian would mean facing difficulties.
And I think that's a really crucial point. Paul and Barnabas knew firsthand that following Jesus wasn't going to be a walk in the park.
Right.
They wanted to prepare these new Christians for the reality of what they might have to go through.
To give them the strength to hold on to their faith when things got tough.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder, though, why would they focus on the negative stuff? Wouldn't it have been easier to just talk about the good things?
Well, I think they understood that sometimes your faith grows the most when you're facing hard times.
Okay.
It's when you face challenges and overcome obstacles that you really figure out what you believe.
Like a muscle that gets stronger when you lift weights.
Exactly. And this whole idea of suffering for what you believe in, that's not unique to Paul and Barnabas.
Right.
This theme is all over the New Testament.
It really challenges that idea that being a Christian is all about feeling good and comfortable.
It does. It's a call to something much deeper.
Something that takes real courage and strength.
And a willingness to embrace the tough stuff.
And Paul and Barnabas, they really show us how to navigate those difficult parts of the journey.
They do. They faced so much opposition and hardship. They were even rejected by their own people, but they never wavered in their commitment.
Their perseverance is truly inspiring.
It is. It shows us that we're not alone in our struggles.
Others have faced the same things and come out stronger because of it.
Exactly. And that brings us back to what we were talking about earlier about community.
Yeah.
Paul and Barnabas didn't face those challenges alone.
Right?
They had each other, and they had the support of those new Christian communities that were being formed.
That's right.
They really understood how important it was to come together.
To encourage each other and lift each other up.
Exactly.
That sense of community is so crucial, especially when you're going through hard times or feeling lost.
Absolutely. That's when we need to lean on each other the most.
Draw strength from each other.
And remind each other of what we believe in. And that's why I think appointing those elders was such a critical moment in the development of the early church.
I see.
Those elders weren't just figureheads. They were spiritual leaders, mentors, guides.
Right.
People who could help nurture and protect those new communities.
So when we think about this part of the story, I think it's a good reminder that faith is not something we're supposed to do all by ourselves.
That's so important.
It's about finding our people,
Our tribe.
our support system.
The people who understand what we're going through.
Exactly. The people who can support us and challenge us and keep us strong.
It's about remembering that we also need to be that support system for other people.
Right. It goes both ways.
Just like Paul and Barnabas took care of those new communities, we're also called to encourage and uplift and strengthen those around us.
I love that. It's a beautiful reminder that faith is both personal and communal.
Absolutely. We're all in this together.
We support each other, we learn from each other, and we work together to build a better world.
That's so well said. It reminds me of a verse from Hebrews. It says, "And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near."
That's such a powerful reminder of how important it is to have community, especially when things are tough.
It really is. We need each other.
We need to gather together and share our experiences and offer support.
And remind each other of the hope that keeps us going.
And that hope in the end comes from knowing that we're not alone in this.
That's right.
We have God who loves us.
And who's with us every step of the way.
The story of Paul and Barnabas is proof of that.
They faced so much, but they never lost sight of their mission or their faith in God.
And what they did had a huge impact on the world.
It did. They helped to spread Christianity and change the lives of countless people.
And their story still inspires us today.
It really does. It shows us that we can make a difference too, even in small ways.
We can bring hope to others.
We can work for change.
And we can do it all knowing that God is there to help us.
Every step of the way.
Yeah.
It's amazing how a story from so long ago can still speak to us today.
It really is. And what strikes me is how much their journey is like what so many people of faith go through today. You know, we face challenges and pushback sometimes, even from people in our own communities.
Yeah, you're right. The world can feel like a pretty tough place to be a person of faith sometimes.
It can, but even with all that, there's this incredible sense of hope in Acts 14. I mean, even with all the hardships, the message of the gospel kept spreading.
It did.
New communities were forming, people's lives were changing.
It's a testament to the power of faith to overcome any obstacle.
Yeah, for sure. And those early believers, they were so resilient.
They were.
It's inspiring.
It is.
So looking back at everything we've talked about today, What would you say is the biggest takeaway from this deep dive into Acts 14?
For me, it's that reminder that God can use anyone to do amazing things.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if you're not perfect.
Right.
Paul and Barnabas, they weren't superheroes. They were just regular people who had doubts and fears and faced opposition just like we do.
Right.
But they said yes to God.
And trusted that he would work through them.
Exactly.
Their example is so encouraging.
It is.
It reminds us that we don't have to have all the answers to be used by God.
We just have to be open to his call.
Even when it's scary or we don't know what's going to happen.
That's right.
And we have to remember that we're not alone in all of this.
We're not.
We have our communities and we have God.
Always there to guide us and support us.
Acts 14 is more than just a story from the
It's
past.
a timeless message.
A message of hope and resilience and the incredible power of faith to change the world.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, thank you so much for walking us through this chapter today.
It was my pleasure.
I feel like I have a much deeper understanding of what those early Christians went through.
That's great to hear.
And I'm leaving here feeling incredibly hopeful and inspired.
That's wonderful. And to everyone listening out there, we hope this deep dive into Acts 14 has given you something to think about. Maybe it sparked your curiosity to learn more about this chapter or to connect with your own community of faith. Or maybe it's given you the courage to share your own beliefs with the world.
Whatever it is, we encourage you to keep seeking exploring and keep diving deep into the amazing world of history, culture, and ideas.
Until next time.